Hi, Dr. Rob.
Hello, Tammy.
So we're on opposite coasts. I'm in New York and you're in California. So we've got the United
We've got the
States
country
covered.
covered.
Yeah. So
We're a
so
big
we've got
parentheses.
questions. I'm new to SLAA and had two books by Pia Melody suggested to me, Understanding Love Addiction and Understanding Codependency. Recently, I heard about your new concept of prodependence, and I'm wondering if I could skip these books. What's the difference between love addiction and prodependence? Oh my gosh, that's a great question, but like, I can't wait to hear your answer.
Well, first of all, I do think you can skip those books. I think they're very much grounded in the last century. And I think we've moved beyond, I believe we moved beyond blaming and shaming and questioning spouses and loving people who are doing their best to love us addicts, and we just screw up. And the idea that we should look for what's wrong with you in the moment that we're beginning to heal doesn't make any sense to me. So yes, I did write a book called Prodependence, which was really what I did was I took codependency and I turned it on a 180-degree axis. And instead of saying what's wrong with this person who's hanging around with this loser, alcoholic, drug addict, whatever, I'm saying, wow, how great are you to be hanging out with us? Who would do that except you? And I'm so grateful. So yes, I do believe we've moved beyond the Pia Melody sort of stuff of the last century. But as far as love addiction, I think they're very different things, because love addiction, in my mind, is about loving someone as an object. They're not really a person to you. You don't really love them. It's more narcissistic than that. It's more like, I love what they can do for me. So love addicts are all about taking someone who might be the wrong person, might be a screwed up person, you know, and just saying, okay, I'm going to throw fairy lights over you and I'm going to make you into the person I need you to be. And then if you're not the person I need you to be, I'm going to blame you and shame you and rage at you and dump you and move on to the next person. So love addicts really choose relationships based on their need, which we all do, but not making good choices because they're not that interested in who the other person is. They're much more interested in how that other person makes them feel. Prodependence and being in a partnership means you actually love that person. You're committed to that person, and that person has failed emotionally, intellectually, in some way, physically, and you're going in there to try to help them, rescue them, save them, and your marriage and your relationship, because you love them, not because they're some kind of object to you. And I think that's very much the difference. And I don't believe that partners who engage with addicts are love addicted. I think you know us, you know the good about us, you know the bad about us, and you're choosing to stay because you care about us or you see hope in this relationship. I don't think that's codependent, and I don't think that's love addicted. I just think that's healthy love of a partner who you believe in. So hopefully that answers those questions, Tammy.
That was great, because I was like, these things are so like they're not.
They're amorphous.
Yes, thank you. And you know, I talk all the time about, you know, partners, they see a broken person and they still see the good and they love them. It isn't all black and white that now they're horrible. They were really good and now they're horrible.
Right.
They are still able to tune into those pieces, you know, that are meaningful and, you know, and want good things for them. But, you know, to pathologize that and make that bad just feels terrible. So
wrong.
Okay.
And yes, you don't need those books anymore unless you're living in 1997.
There
is
you
my
go.
answer to that question.
Yes. Okay, I feel like I have a hard time accepting the pain that my addictions have caused my ex-wife, and even find myself annoyed by the stories my buddies in SAA tell about their wives. I think I'm in denial and maybe not able to handle the truth at this stage of recovery. How do I empathize with the partners of sex addicts?
What does that mean exactly, do you think? Because there's a lot of ways to look at that question. I'm not sure exactly what that...
Okay, what I felt like is this person feels, it gets into the shame. It, like, as soon as they hear, you know, those stories, they're going to, oh, you know, I did this and I caused so much pain, and they haven't learned to own the behavior, know that they aren't the behavior, but have tools to be able to, you know, to be empathetic with someone.
So are you answering this question? I think you are.
I don't know. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a process. I mean, with everything, we have to learn it. What do you think?
I'm not, what I wasn't sure of is, because we often have addicts and people in recovery who are angry at their spouses because they're tired of their reactivity. And they're tired of that person giving them a hard time, and they're really struggling with that. I think what this person is struggling with is the shame they have over what they've done.
Yeah, that's what I read.
And I really, for you, just to say this to you, I don't think this is something that you can heal with your wife or your partner. You cannot, because let's look at it this way. You feel terrible about what you've done. You hate yourself. You did the wrong thing. You wish you hadn't done it, but you did it to her. She's not someone who can make you feel better. You did it to her. Job is to be angry at you. I do think that you need support and validation to get out of the shame and understand, as I say to everybody who comes to work with us, you're not a bad person, but you're kind of broken. And that broken part is what hurt your spouse. And now you need to go fix that part so you cannot hurt them anymore. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person. And in fact, I would just say also that whole line of shame, which is, I hate myself. I can't believe I did this. What's wrong with me? I should know better. I'm not a good guy. That's all kind of selfish in a way, because even though it makes you feel bad and feel terrible, it makes you feel bad and terrible about yourself. What I would rather hear from somebody in recovery is, I can't imagine what my spouse is going through. I feel so terrible at what my daughter must be experiencing. That's what I'm interested in hearing, not how you feel about yourself in terms of I'm so horrible, I'm so bad, but more how your behavior has affected others. And by the way, if your behavior has affected others, you can do it differently next time and they'll be affected differently. So why don't you hold on to the fact that this person is still in your life, is willing to make things better, and then do your own work so you can come back to her with a clear mind without looking. And by the way, her forgiveness is not the answer. Don't go running to her and say, oh, please, please forgive me so I can feel better. This person will forgive you when they're ready to forgive you, and that could take a very long time.
Well, and they're an ex-wife, so I don't know if they're in your life, but if you have children, they are still co-parenting, so they may be in your life. But I agree. I mean, I look at the things that I did, and I don't even call them mistakes I made or whatever. I mean, it was all part of my addiction. It was all part of what I needed to do in order to get to where I am. And probably, I mean, had I not done all those, insane things, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I like where I'm at. So it was all necessary. But I don't want to do it again. I've learned a lot, and I don't have to do it again. So like you said, I would rather use that to not do it and make it.
We have something in our recovery and our healing process we call a living amends, which is, it's not so much about your apologies or how bad you feel about it or any of that. It's more about, what are you doing to make it a better world? What are you doing to make your life easier for your wife, your family? How are you paying this forward, this healing process, so that others can join you in this good place? Rather than sitting around and being depressed about how horrible you are, which is really not productive.
Next question. Now that I am sober from porn and masturbation, I have been eating like crazy. Is substituting food for sexually acting out dangerous for my sobriety? Any suggestions for dealing with food addiction?
Stop eating.
That's not true.
Sorry. I don't know if this is a food addiction, but I do know that people shift from one to the other. And, I get concerned when someone says, oh, now I need to go to OA and SA and LA and MA and NA. I think you're in a program. You're working with someone. Sex addiction treatment is about behavior. So you're not just dealing with drinking and drugs, substances. You're dealing with behaviors. You can easily put some boundaries, just like you do around your sexual life, around your eating. But as Tammy will say, the goal is to be accountable. If you're not accountable, it ain't going to work. So for me, I'll just say it, I'm a late night eater. I love, when everybody's asleep, going to the fridge and seeing the sweetest thing I can find, or carbohydrates. What I have learned to do is text a friend before I go to bed, hey, I'm going to bed and I'm not going to the refrigerator. That's all I have to say. I don't even have them respond. It's just that I have reached out. So if you have a therapist or a sponsor, help them help you be accountable to how you eat. And let me say one more thing about it. The way we look at sex addiction recovery is not black and white. It's not like alcohol where you never drink again. It's how do you modulate and moderate your sex life so it doesn't cause problems? Well, eating disorders are very similar. We don't tell people to stop eating. We tell them to moderate and regulate their eating according to some kind of plan. So if you've made a plan for your sexual life, you can make a plan for your eating and follow it in a very similar way. Hey, Tammy, can I just say one quick thing?
Yes, please.
I'm just really thrilled that we have 47 people here tonight, and I really want to say thank you to all of you. And I hope that the platform we're creating of giving this work away, whether it's in groups or sessions or webinars or Q&As, this means a lot to us, and we wouldn't be sitting here for a year and a half. So thank you for showing up and giving us the chance to do this education. And yeah, we'll tell you about more fun stuff in a minute. Oh, by the way, Tammy, I just got a note from someone who's been through our treatment program who happens to be sitting at home, I think, here in a meeting, and I do our meeting. And I just want to say to all of you guys that this is sort of how we believe in doing treatment. We have a treatment center. We see people there. But hopefully some of you, and it's residential, so you're living here, but hopefully some of you are learning all about this and getting involved in this network, this community that we've created before you get to treatment. And if you go to treatment or you go to therapy, whatever you do, it'll be thereafter. And so we hope to have a sort of continuum of care that you have people to connect to and information to get no matter where you are in recovery or no matter where your spouse is in recovery. And I'm just thrilled to be able to do this. So thank you, Tammy, for being my partner. And let's go on to more questions.
Well, two things. So I was telling the group before you joined about your new couples lecture series that starts August 22nd. So it's a 5-week lecture series, 90 minutes each lecture and some Q&A. And then the next men's work group starts August 2nd. That's a 90-minute section or 90-minute session for 6 weeks that is structured to go through the Sex Addiction 101 workbook. So really helpful. And Dr. David has an interactive group for co-occurring sex addiction and chemical dependency that will be starting in early August too. So those are online options, not therapy, not treatment, but again, additional education and support. So, but I do, I got to tag on to the food one too. So
Please.
Yes, because eating disorder was part of my issue. And I didn't go to a whole separate program. I applied the principles, but for me coming up with a plan and working that plan and being intentional. So, so Dr. Rob was saying, I go to the fridge and look for the highest thing. I was like, oh my God, I would feel horrible about myself and I wouldn't sleep good and all this. So I had to learn what worked for me. And I came up with a plan, and I'm not so rigid that if I, that my shame spiral starts if I don't
that's eating. To be rigid is to be eating disorder.
Correct. Well, and I was, but yeah, so either way, but it's one of those things where, I have a plan. It overall works for me. I'm healthy. And that, that gives me the balance, because it really is about being holistically and just going from one acting out behavior to the next. I'm never really in recovery. I'm always looking for something external to soothe me. So.
And I'm always feeling shame, bad about myself. And part of the big goal of recovery is to avoid things that make you feel bad about yourself. Unless it's your spouse, in which case you've earned that.
Okay, next one. Would you consider simultaneously smoking pot, drinking alcohol, and taking a few ADHD stimulants while masturbating to porn, a type of chemsex?
Sure. Chemsex involves doing drugs and having sex. And people do it for various reasons. Some people just do it occasionally because they want to make their sex more exciting and good for them. Some people do it because they don't enjoy sex very much, and doing drugs allows them to enjoy it. Some people do it because they have all kinds of fantasies and things they want to play out, but unless they're high, they don't enjoy getting into that stuff. So it doesn't have to be an addiction, and I am not. Tammy may have different feelings. I'm not opposed to recreational drug use for healthy people. They want to smoke pot, they want to have drinks, none of my business. But if you are struggling with these issues, you'll never get healing while you have all those things in the air. First, if you're here, you probably are concerned about your sexual behavior or something going on relationship-wise, sex-wise. If you have a problem with behavior, food, sex, gambling, gaming, you're never going to resolve those problems while you're drinking and using, because drinking and using is disinhibiting. I absolutely say, I'm not going to do this, and I have a couple of drinks. It's like, well, what's the big deal? And that's why that's the problem with these co-occurring issues, is that if you don't deal with both, you're going to end up in the same place.
And my thought was, what's the quality of your relationships? If you have healthy relationships and this is just part of who you are, and it's not affecting, your significant other, knows about this and it's all fine, then it's all fine. And
you're not looking at illegal material.
Thank you. That's a good point too. But to me, I'm like, all of those things would keep me so distant from everybody, and being disconnected and out of healthy relationships is not what I want, but everybody gets to pick. So, okay. Next question. Do you have any suggested literature for mother enmeshed men? What are your thoughts on Ken Adams' books?
I think that Ken Adams wrote the best and probably the only meaningful books that I've read outside of heavy-duty psychotherapy literature, which is a little hard for everyone to read, about maternal enmeshment. And Ken is a friend of mine, a friend of Tammy's. We've worked with him for many years. Ken wrote two books, one that are meaningful for us. One is called Silently Seduced, which is really about maternal enmeshment, maternal seduction, and what happens when you have a very troubled mom who makes your life hers. And then Married to Mom is kind of a follow-up, which is how do those qualities in the way people I grew up with, how am I replicating them in my relationship, and often turning my wife into my mother. But they're both really good books on that topic. And by the way, Ken does, and Tammy can, if you're interested, write Tammy at seekingintegrity.com. That's TAMI. Ken does workshops, and we can let you know where they are and connect you with Ken. And I think he does them quarterly, something like that, Tammy. And now I think he's doing them online.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I haven't kept up with his schedule, but he has a very successful podcast on sex, love, and addiction. If you haven't already listened to that, he did a podcast with Dr. Rob. And
on my podcast, right?
Yes, it was very well done. It's very good information. But yeah, he's probably, like, when people talk about this topic, he's the person I send
He's the
them
guy.
to. Yep. Okay. In early recovery, first 6 months since disclosure, what are some useful suggestions, recommendations for a couple when the betrayed partner goes through periods of ambivalence and the SA partner is doing what they can? It feels like building emotional intimacy can be challenging in these times, yet more important to do so in an intentional way, but it's challenging circumstances. So any recommendations you have would be extremely helpful.
Well, I wrote a book about this. I wrote a book about this because I've written 10 books, well, 9, 10 is on the way. And I mostly write about my experiences in the work, although other things too. And one of the things that I have profoundly experienced over the last 25 years of working with men who cheat is how poorly men are really, organized, designed to understand what a woman goes through when she is betrayed. We often show up with candy and flowers and I'm sorry and I didn't mean it and I really love you. And then 3 or 4 months goes by and we're like, hey, I did the candy, the flowers, they love it, forgive me, why aren't you over this? And so I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse because I truly believe that it can take a year or more for especially a woman who's experiencing betrayal in a meaningful partner to get over it. And she's not going to get over it. First of all, she's never going to get over it, but to learn to tolerate what's happened. And we have to act in a particular way. If we're running around saying, I didn't mean it, forgive me, it wasn't that bad, please, it's not going to work. I wrote the book because I want you to understand the task that is in front of you if you want to heal your relationship. And yes, it is a lot about tolerating your spouse's ambivalence. We actually have a word about this for you spouses. We have a phrase called ambivalent love. Ambivalent love, meaning that once you find out what we've been up to, you love us and you hate us. You think about what we've done, you hate us, we ruined your life. And then sometimes on a nice day when you're not thinking about our acting out, you look over and you see us with a kid or something, you're like, oh, he's so sweet, or she's so sweet. All of a sudden you love us. So this experience of bouncing back and forth between love and hate is very common, and in particular for partners of sex addicts. And that's something that we have to tolerate. I would not, as an addict, read too much into the good times, and I wouldn't read too much into the bad times, because you're going to have both going back and forth for a while.
Next question. I attend SLAA and SAA meetings. I've heard a lot about the tradition of anonymity, but I'm not totally buying it. I don't feel afraid to tell people I'm in recovery and for what. I think we need sex addicts to speak up and become activists seeking to break the stigma and bring attention to the medical neglect experienced by our fellow addicts. How do you understand the value of anonymity in recovery?
Well, I think it's a very important thing, and maybe you're not aware of it, or maybe you don't think of it the way I do. Sometimes I'll tell you folks, or I'll tell an audience working with that I'm a sex addict. But I don't go out there in the public media, in the press, and say, oh, hey, I'm a sex addict. And that's not because I don't want people to understand what I do, or the only reason is, and I think this is why AA has this tradition, but Tammy, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that I don't want anybody, once I go out there and saying, I'm a sex addict, and I know what sex addiction is, and I know how to fix it, and everyone needs to know about it. Well, that's great until I fall on my face with a slip, or I have a relapse. And then I've become the face of failure. I've become the face of, oh, that doesn't really work. That isn't really a thing. So we've been drilled into us as AAs and SA to not try to present ourselves as the glowing picture of addiction, nor to be the explainers of the addiction process. So when I talk to you guys, 90% of the time, I'm speaking as a therapist. I may use my addiction experience, but I'm rarely speaking to you as a sex addict. And I certainly don't go out in public and say, hey, everybody, I'm a sex addict and I wrote all these books, because that would be to betray the anonymity of this program. And so, yes, I absolutely believe that you need people who are professionals and in recovery to talk about addiction and talk about being addicts, but to run around and really make that a focus of attention is to leave other people with the potential of being let down if you don't do it perfectly, and you won't. Is that your understanding, Tammy?
Yes, and I was actually going to say, go read some of the history books on AA and Bill W. and why. I mean, go read about the traditions. Like if you do the study, you'll get the framework of why that is so important. But it is, and it isn't about being, it's anonymity at the level of press, like there's social media
Press,
wasn't a
radio, and
thing. I know it wasn't, social media wasn't a thing yet, but, I think it is, for all those reasons, important to, it's for the safety of the organization. It's not so much about us, but I also think about, like my family and things like that. And I want to protect them as well. So I think about it on lots of levels, but I would invite you to go do the homework on the history of AA, because everything came from there. So, okay, next question. It seems like there are many more men who cheat on their wives than women cheating on their husbands. Is male nature not meant to be monogamous? Is the society and religions forcing men into monogamy despite what their natural instincts tell them to do? That's an interesting question.
Well, I don't think that's universal. First of all, men have this little hormone called testosterone. And testosterone makes us look at things and want to be with, and say, oh, look at the butt on her, and all that stuff about looking. And men tend to act out sexually more often than women. Men tend to act out with violence more often than women. And both rage, anger, irritability, and sexuality are affected by testosterone. So it makes sense that there are more men in prison. That makes sense that there are more men committing sexual crimes, because that drive to pursue that sort of predatory feeling is what testosterone does. And I can tell you, having been on testosterone for 20 years or something, because my body doesn't make it anymore, it hasn't for a long time. Whenever I've been going on vacation or something, and I took a little more because I wasn't going to have someone I was traveling, and I don't want to travel with needles and all that. When I took a little bit more, I was like, oh, I want to have sex with everybody, and it's really true. There's a reason why when men get older, some of us are a little calmer. So yes, that's true. Are men built for monogamy? Sure. I think if you talk to the anthropologists and the experts, they will tell you that we're at least built for serial monogamy, that we're very good men at being monogamous, one person at a time to many people, that we are good at that. We are less good at being monogamous with one person for a long period of time. That's harder for us as males, no matter how much we love you. And then if we're broken and there's something really wrong with us, we might act out very rapidly with sexual behavior because it's caught up with our wounding and it becomes an addiction. Anything else you want to say about this? A great question.
It is. And the only thing I was going to say is, and I don't remember where I got the statistic, but at one point I'd heard that approximately 40% of sex addicts are female. They're just less likely to be in meetings and all of those things. So,
Right.
So while while there's a perception that more men cheat, there are plenty of women that do as well. And I think, for those that are serial cheaters and really struggle, the brokenness, it may come out in just a different way, but at the end of the day, there's plenty of, Ashley Madison, there were plenty of women, or still are plenty of women that are hooking up too. So.
And I want to add to that, Tammy, yes, we didn't think there were many female sex addicts. I used to see some in treatment in the 80s and the 90s, but now I see hordes of them online. And I think this generation has been affected by porn, and some of the issues are going on online in a different way than my generation was. I also agree with Tammy that women are much more secretive. They're not as willing to say, I have a sex problem, because we all know what we call a woman who's having a lot of sex. It's a bad name, but we don't call men that. We call men players. So culturally, women get no validation for cheating. Men get a lot. Ooh, dude, look what we get a lot of validation for it. And so there is a cultural piece, but moreover, and there's a biological piece, and there's also the nature of the difference between the genders. Women do cheat, but I think they're a little better at it. And not only that, but think about this. Men don't really think about women cheating. I do not think about my spouse, my friend, I just don't think about women cheating, because men are narcissistic, and we never expect that someone we love is going to cheat on us. We don't. And therefore, we're not always looking for signs in a woman that she is cheating. But I'll give you a secret to my career. my biggest keywords, whether it's a blog or an article or a website, in other words, what people flock to read about are these two words, cheating and infidelity, followed by betrayal. Those are the top three: cheating, infidelity, and betrayal. And guess who does 95% of those searches? Women. Women are tuned in. You ladies are tuned in to looking for cheating, to looking for betrayal. Automatically, you're just scanning for it because it's biological. If you have 3 kids and you're living in a cave and we leave, you're not going to make it. So you're constantly looking biologically and to protect your brood and your nest to make sure that we don't go away. We're not worried that you're going away. We figure you're in the nest, you got kids, you're not going anywhere. So men are much likely to be suspicious of women cheating, but lots of women cheat. It's just they're men. It never occurs to us that they might be.
Good answer. Okay, so here's another cheating question. Is there a difference between men flirting and women flirting, and are both technically cheating?
Well, cheating is cheating. So let's define cheating. If you're in a committed relationship and you are doing things with someone else, that if your spouse were present, if your spouse were looking over your shoulder, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, and they were listening and watching this conversation you're having with this person, would they feel like you're cheating? They're a much better judgment than you are. Because I might say, oh, we're just chatting and looking at each other and spending time together. My spouse might say, but you talked about our marriage, but you said you weren't happy, but you blah, 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 blah. So I don't think that we're always the best judge of cheating, but if you bring even in your head someone like my spouse or my sister or my dad into that conversation, or my child, and let them watch it and think, would I be uncomfortable with that? You'll know really, or would you be uncomfortable with your dad or your sister or your child watching this conversation? I often tell men, when you're out in the world and you wonder whether something you're doing would upset your spouse, just put them in your head. And if you think they were with you right now and what you're doing would upset them, don't do it. And Stan Tatkin, who's one of our favorite therapists. So I do have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And one of the podcasts is with this really famous therapist named Stan Tatkin. And what Dr. Tatkin talks about is how you best preserve your relationship. And he says, when you go out in the world, you don't think about, oh, I want this and I want to flirt with that person. Oh, you think, what would be best for my relationship? And if you make your decisions in the world based on what is best for my relationship first, and what is best for me second, you'll never have a problem with cheating. What was it? You want to answer the question about women? I'm not a woman, so I could make some guesses, but.
Is there a difference between the two flirting?
Well, I think we're much more direct in the way we cheat. I'll give you an example. You tell me. Men, this is so funny. This amuses me so much. I know you guys are in pain, you're struggling, but I have to tell you, this amuses me. Men who are chatting up women online send them pictures of their penis, as if some woman is going to want to see that, because a man is thinking like he does, which is, if I were a guy, I'd want to see her boobs. And so he thinks, if she's like me, she's going to want it, but that's not necessarily what turns women on. So men will be, I think, more direct, more overt, probably more, less hidden, my guess is, and women will have more subtle ways of wanting to initiate a contact. But Tammy, I don't think you would send me a picture.
No,
Tammy,
I would not.
You wouldn't send me a picture of your penis, would you?
No, I would not.
Right, I didn't think so.
I don't have one to send, but I would not anyway. But
Okay.
But I was thinking, like, the word that came to mind for women is, I think we can be more manipulative about how we flirt. That was the word that came to mind, right or wrong. But like you said,
more subtle, less obvious.
Yeah, but manipulative to me fits, because I want, because it's, I want to get something and I'm going to, to make it happen. So that was my thought. Okay. But I agree with you. If you wouldn't do it in front of them, don't do it.
It's cheating.
Mm-hmm. I've often heard you say that our arousal template doesn't change, but what about neuroplasticity? As my porn addiction escalated, I had to escalate to content that I previously found repulsive, or at least not in alignment with my previous sexual tastes. The neurons that fire together wire together. Is that not the case, that since I wired my brain to find taboo things appealing, I could potentially rewire them again to my original tastes? Thank you. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm writing. I want to make sure I get this question right. So,
okay.
First of all, how things fire together and wire together, just that part depends on how old you are. If I'm learning things at 3, 4, 5, and 6, they're going to be burned in much more deeply than something I learn in college. Because the most basic lessons we learn in life are about connection, relationship, touching, intimacy, getting our needs met, the interchange between us and another person. And so those are actually the most important things to get wired and fired, is how we learn early in life to negotiate relationships, intimacy. And in fact, I would suggest that most of the men, or most of the sex addicts here, have problems going back to things they learned early in life about relationships and connection. However, and I'm going to upset you now, and I apologize, but this is the truth, because I had to write a whole article about this. If you're turned on by something online, you're turned on by it. If you're not turned on by something online, you're not. Let me be more specific. You may be into vanilla porn, and that's what you're watching, and then all of a sudden you're into 3, and then you're looking at all kinds of different things. You're following a track of your arousal. You're not following a track of things that you wouldn't be interested in. Now, you may not be aware that you put sex and violence together, ever. It may have never occurred to you, but you found it online, and you found it interesting, and all of a sudden you're looking at S&M videos that you never thought you would look at. Does that mean that looking at porn has changed your arousal template? No, it has not. What it means is that porn brought to you things already existing in your arousal template that you didn't even know were there, but now you've seen them, and now you know they turn them on, and now you're interested. And I want to give an example. You may or may not know this, but I am a homosexual. I am interested in men. I am married to a man. When I looked at porn, it was male porn. Maybe it was multiple men, maybe, but it was men. You can show me boobs all day long. You can show me boobs in porn, boobs in life, boobs on the beach. All I'm going to think about is bikinis. I'm not going to think what color, what shape. I'm not going to think, oh, those boobs are really hot and I want to have sex with them, because I'm not attracted to boobs. Sorry, ladies. And so if you're not attracted to the things you're looking at, they're not going to turn you on. Many people want to blame the porn because they found something that is not in their value system that they're turned on by. When you put the porn away, it's very likely that you will return to a much less intense level of things you want to look at and things you want to engage in. But once you learn about it in the porn, it's not going away. Once you know that you are interested in something and it does have some innate resonance in terms of making you aroused, that isn't going to go away. You'll always know that there's a part of you that's into this or a part of you that's into that you didn't know about before it was exposed to you. Folks, we do have an unconscious and a subconscious, and those parts of our mind hold on to things that we're not ready to handle. We don't really ever need to look at. I mean, there are all kinds of parts of ourselves we don't know about. However, when they're shoved in our face and we have to look at them, we might wake up and say, oh, wow, I never realized it, but that turns me on. And I've spent extra time with this because there's a line of thinking in the porn world that has to do with conditioning. And this guy named Gary Wilson and his book, Your Brain on Porn, this idea that if you look at something enough, you're going to get hooked on it, and you're not going to get rid of it until you stop looking at the porn, and then you're not going to be hooked on it anymore. And it's just not true. That isn't true. That is an incorrect statement. What is true is you look at porn, and when you find new things, if it turns you on, it's part of your arousal template, and it will remain with you. And maybe if you've never seen it, it wouldn't become something that turns you on or you want to pursue, but now that you have, you've learned that it was part of you all along. Yeah, so you can look at a lot of stuff, and if you find it arousing, that doesn't mean you have to go do it in the world, but it does mean in some part of you, you got turned on by that, even though it doesn't go align with your values and beliefs. And I'll say one more thing about this. And this is a tough one to say, so ladies, if you're going to beat me up about this, write Tammy at seekingintegrity.com and she'll tell me. But there are women who have rape fantasies. There are women who have all kinds of rape fantasies at the hotel, at work, all kinds of, but they're fantasies. Most women do not, almost all women do not want to be raped, but many women have rape fantasies, and they don't walk around the world saying, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I want some guy to rape me. They say, oh, I have this fantasy about blah, 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 and I use it when I masturbate, but I would never want to be raped. Maybe in bed with someone, they might want to play with being held down, but they're in a mutually engaged relationship. They're not really being raped, they're playing. So there's a difference between sexual play and sexual acting out. And you may be able to and want to play with some things you found online. Some things may be things you want to just let dissipate. And if you stay away from them online, they will eventually dissipate, but they won't go away.
Thank you. That was a complex question and a great answer.
It's a
Okay,
book.
it is. Add it to your list. Is it possible for an addict to start their recovery process and never relapse again? Relapse. As a partner, I don't think I can handle my SA relapsing.
So Cami pointed that word out, relapse, I think, because she wanted me to help you guys understand the difference between a slip and a relapse. So a slip is an unintended return to behavior that I wanted to put behind me. And I didn't really expect it. It was like I had a fight with my spouse. They went out of town. I decided to skip that meeting. And before I knew it, I was into something that was a problem. That's a slip. And what makes it a slip is as soon as it's over, I call my sponsor, I call my therapist, I call my friends, I talk about it, I work through it. And then when my spouse comes home, I tell my spouse, because I have no secrets and I don't want to have any secrets. And I know that if I keep this a secret, it's very likely I'll go back and do it again because I got away with it. So we do have slips. I might look at porn again. I might hire a sex worker again. I might call that affair partner. I cannot promise any of you spouses that that won't happen. And I don't think if you really are a little bit, if you've had some time with working with us around this, you probably will come to agree that what's most important for the relationship is that I'm completely and fully honest with you. It's also the most important thing for my recovery, because a relapse is when I go back to old behavior and I don't tell anybody and I keep it a secret and I don't tell my spouse. And let me tell you, as a spouse, I guarantee, while you would never want your male partner to return to this behavior, if he did, I'm absolutely certain you'd want to know about it. And I tell the guys and ladies, when you have a slip and you let your partner know, they will say, I could never live with this. If this happens again, I'm leaving, all that. Because that's how you feel. It's not necessarily what you want to do. When push comes to shove, I've seen many partners say, God, I can't believe she did that again, and I hate her for doing it, and I'm so angry, but there's something different here. She actually told me about it, and I'm not in the dark, and I know where she's at, and I know where I'm at, and even though it isn't going to be a good week, it's still a step in the right direction. Perfection is not a step in the right direction. There's a lot in the 12-step programs about anti-perfectionism. In fact, I would say it's perfectionism that got some of us here. So I cannot promise you that someone won't have a slip. I can't promise you that they will. I think it's more likely that they will than they won't. What matters to me is that they tell you about it. That is a much greater sign of recovery to me than if they go jack off somewhere or call somebody. That's second to, are they willing to be honest and grow? So yes, it probably will happen, and hopefully it'll be a slip and not a relapse.
And I want to say that as a partner, I don't think I can handle it. I think you are far more resilient than you think you are. And if you have support around you, you can understand that it's a speed bump, but it doesn't have to be falling off the cliff. So I think what Dr. Rob said, yeah, it's going to be a bad week, but this time this person was honest with me, and I want to affirm that even though I don't like what happened, like you have to think about what the consequences of that would be for you. If it really is all or nothing, then the person's probably not going to ever tell you, and that
Right.
sets up for dishonesty and more likely, in my opinion, to be a relapse. So,
and let me just say one more thing to all the spouses about that, because Tammy, that's really important. Look, I understand that people do things, our lovers, our loved ones do things. You just say, I can't stand this anymore. I'm going to leave, or I've got to leave. It's fine to say that to your friend, to your therapist, to your mother, but if you want to leave and you tell your partner you're going to leave, and then like if you say, if you masturbate to porn again, or if you call that prostitute again, I'm leaving, and then they do, you better leave. I mean it, because you've lost all credibility with that person. They're going to go do whatever the heck they want as an addict, because they know that you're all words. So I would be careful, rather than saying, if you do this again, I will leave you, which, as Tammy said, will pretty much guarantee you'll never know what's going on. You can say something like, I expect that if this happens again, I will know within 24 hours after you've talked to other people and let them know and kind of work through it a little bit. And if I don't hear about it in 24 hours, that might be a reason why I don't think I can stay. Not the slip, the lying, the secrecy.
Next question. What would you suggest gay male couples who want to have a successful open relationship from the beginning? What kind of principles would make an open relationship successful?
So we're not talking about sex addiction now. We're just talking about open relationships.
Apparently, because yeah.
Okay. What makes open relationships work is two things: having rules and sticking by them. That's really what it's all about. In other words, and I know that some of you who are dealing with addiction and never want to have an open relationship, I know this will be the conversation you want to have, but I'm answering the question for this person. It may be that you want to have sex outside your relationship, but you don't want to have any kind of emotional relationship. You might have an agreement with your spouse that, especially as gay men, either one of us might be able to go out and have casual sex occasionally, and you'd have to define what occasionally is as a couple. But if you see the person a second time, or if you call them, or if you engage them, I want to know about it because that's not okay. So the boundary might be casual sex is okay, but seeing them a second time, getting to know them, calling them, becoming friends or lovers is not. Some couples say, I want to know if you did that. I want to know if you went out Friday when I was at someone's house and you had sex with someone else. Other people will say, I don't want to know. I just want to know if I need to watch out for something. Like if you got a disease, rules about what, wear a condom, do this and that. So what makes these things work, I think, are a couple of things. One is the boundaries. This is how we do it. This is how we don't. And I don't say to myself, well, I'll just do this one time and they won't know I follow the rules. And second of all, I think you have to be a couple that is very secure in your love for each other. I've worked with couples, especially gay couples, who will say, well, our relationship isn't really working, so let's just go have sex with a whole bunch of other people and make it open. And that's pretty much a way out of the relationship. I think you can have an open relationship from the get-go, or you can close it, or you can open it at any point. But all the way along, there needs to be a lot of communication, a lot of discussion, a lot of openness. If I had boundaries, I'd write them down. I'd ask my partner to write them down. We might need to meet once or twice a month to say, how are you doing with the boundary thing? Anything I need to know about? You might want to go to a sex therapist and sit down and make those boundaries so that you can be held to making them productive. Sex addicts don't really, for the most part, get to have open relationships. Few rare cases, but mostly not. But gay men who are living their lives and enjoying each other, or anybody who wants to have an open relationship, I have no judgments about that. Like I have no judgments about people who drink. I just have judgments about alcoholism. I have judgments about cheating, but I don't have judgments about things that people mutually agree to and is not harmful to them.
And I was thinking, and this is way not in my area, but I was thinking it would need to be that it really is a mutual. If somebody's feeling coerced into that boundary, I mean, because I've heard about it more from the sex addiction side of it, where a partner felt coerced and like I needed to do this in order to make this person happy and try to do that. So if two people really are coming into this by a mutual agreement with good boundaries, that would be completely different to me than somebody feeling like I've got to do this, or I've got to let them do this, or whatever. Okay. Next question. What is your opinion on revealing addictions to close family members? My sex and porn addicted partner has essentially revealed to everyone important other than their parents and wants to do that step, but it's incredibly ashamed to do so. I am nervous of them keeping things hidden out of shame if it is reminiscent of what they were doing to me that broke my trust in the first place.
Well, I'm not sure if this is the right answer, but I think there's a difference between secrets and boundaries. There's a very different, my wife or husband or spouse might be a sex addict. And I would never go to my mother because I think, well, I'm going to have to, every Thanksgiving and Christmas for the next whatever it is, Hanukkah, whatever, I'm going to have to see this family and they're going to know what I did. And they're going to look at me like, is it still going? I wouldn't tell someone like that. I would say we're having problems. We're working on things. What I mean by boundaries versus secrets is we kind of have different circles of people in our lives. Like my most intimate friends and family, I tell everything. I have no secrets. But someone like Tammy, for example, I work with her. We're really good friends. I tell her the general things that are going on in my life, but it's something very intimate or personal. It really doesn't belong with her. She's not a family member and she's not close enough to be family, but she is very close to me as a friend. So I tell her a lot of things, but then there might be people I work with that I don't see that often. And, they might just get, so someone very close is going to get all the information. Someone else might get a version of the information, like we're struggling, or we're having a hard time, or I'm just had to go to therapy to work on myself. That said, it is really problematic when you spouses go and run around and tell everybody what's going on. I understand that you don't have a lot of people to turn to. I understand when you're being cheated on, who do you turn to? And also I understand, well, screw this person, they fucked me over, and so now I'm going to tell everyone they know. I understand that's your anger, but the reality is I think it needs to be thought through. If you have to face this person as a couple or individually a year from now, 5 years from now, are you going to be glad you told them? Or are you just telling them in a moment of anger, or in a second where you just need someone to say, yeah, they're awful? Because that second on the lips is forever, well, it's not on the hips, but it's forever out there. So, and by the way, most of all, please don't tell your children. I can't tell you, I can't, I've worked with a number of men whose wives told their children, adult or otherwise, about their sexual behavior. Hey, Tammy, are you frozen? Whoops, whoa, did we freeze? Uh-oh. Tammy, are you there? You guys can hear me.
I can hear you now. I wondered,
Okay.
I didn't know if it was me or you. So
No, it was you, I think.
sorry.
But I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Let me go back to what I was going to say.
You were talking about children.
Oh, right. So, thank you. I've worked with adult children of sex addicts. I've worked with sex addicts who have young children. And universally, I don't think that children need to understand the details of their parents' sexual lives. I don't think any child really wants to know what mom and dad do in bed with themselves or other people. And it will visit them in their heads forever, and it will influence relationships. I worked with this great couple. Tammy, I think you might even have met them. You know them because they brought us little ornaments and as gifts.
Yep.
And this couple, the gentleman came to our treatment center. He was in seeking integrity for a couple of weeks, and the problem in his marriage was not his healing. It wasn't his wife's healing. They were both ready to really work on each other. They loved each other. They have a long relationship. But the problem is that their kids had found out that their mom had been cheated on, and that dad had cheated on her a bunch of times. So the kids were like, Mom, I don't want you to be with him. I don't want you to, and she wanted to be with him. So the feelings that other people can take on related to your situation may not be the ones that you really need to follow. The people who get this information may not be ones you want to run into with this information 5 years from now. You do need to talk to people, but make sure they're safe. That's why we have therapists and clergy that you can go to, and we will never say anything about what you've said because we're not allowed to. Start there and work your way out.
I was thinking that too. I was thinking nieces and nephews all sitting around. I mean, yeah, like.
Yeah, imagine the whole family at Christmas talking about your sexual behavior. And
Yeah,
then you
or
get an
looking
idea.
at you across the
Did
table.
you hear what Uncle Jack did?
Yeah.
Great.
Several years ago, I sought out child porn. I just saw images and no videos, didn't download anything. I haven't gone there since, and my therapist is aware of this. I think I did it out of curiosity and seeking after more intense pornography. I feel terrible about it. I feel a lot of shame and having a hard time forgiving myself for this. How should I approach this?
Don't do it again.
Hasn't done it again.
Right, but that's how you approach it. I think I've done a few illegal things in my life. I think I've done a lot of things that I have regret and sadness about. I wish I hadn't done. But here's the good news. I don't have to do any of them again. I learned my lesson. I learned that makes me feel terrible, and I think it hurts other people. So look, we talk a lot about shame and guilt in treatment and out. So in case you haven't read a lot of Brene Brown, who writes a lot about shame, let me just tell you very simply that guilt is a natural feeling that I did something wrong, and I don't want to feel that bad, guilty feeling again, so I'm not going to do it again. And you may simply be feeling healthy guilt, which is the pain of knowing you have crossed your values and beliefs, and you don't want to do that again. So you're going to back up and not do that anymore. Shame is more like something, I'm a deeply broken, flawed person, and only terrible, awful people would do these kinds of things. And it's much more about the self. I don't think you're a terrible person. I think you did a shitty thing, and you need to not do it again. You need to own it with the people that will support you, and you need to move on.
So the next one I'm really confused at, so I'm going to try to get this right. Have you ever heard about seal anorexia by a sex addict? It says where there's a cycle, 2 weeks crazy, seal needs 2 weeks, nothing, and then your experience with this. Do you understand that?
I think the word is sexual.
Oh, no
Sexual
wonder.
anorexia.
Okay.
And a cycle every 2 weeks where the sex. So I can just speak about this in general. I
Please,
think that's
thank
better.
you, because I was challenged.
So just like there are people who have eating disorders who will go from binge to purge. You know, they'll eat and eat and eat and get really big, and then someone will start throwing up and avoiding food. They can be hyper eating or hypo eating. They can get into anorexia. And I see this a lot with addicts, where, especially sex addicts, where when we're having wild, crazy sex with all these strangers and doing what, no problem, easy as pie. But being sexual with someone we're close to, we care about, we're intimate with, much harder. And so some of us, as rabidly sexual as we are in the world, in a relationship or when faced with one person we care about, we might not be interested in sex at all. I'll also say that, and I say this a lot, that this is a process where we're going to struggle and we're going to make mistakes and the road gets narrower and we need to learn new things. So what was okay with you a year ago may not be okay with you now. But when I walk into a 12-step meeting, I expect sex addicts to have 3 years of sobriety, 5 years of sobriety, stuff like that. But when I run into someone who says, I have 15 years of sobriety, I know what they're going to say. They inevitably say, and I'll say, well, what's that like? 15 years of sobriety, that's really cool. And they'll say, well, I haven't had sex in 15 years. And you know that, oops. This is my doctor. I need to answer this, Tammy. Hold on.
Okay. I'll take this moment to share a few things. I told you about the online, so I put it in the chat. Let me put it in the chat. The online work groups for...
Tell them about my series.
I am. That's what I'm actually doing right now. So for those of you who would like to join Dr. Rob's live lecture series with question and answer for couples, there's the link for that. For those of you that would be interested in the work group for men, that starts August 2nd, or for the chemsex, it's co-occurring sex addiction and chemical dependency with Dr. David, that would also be another option, and all of those are on there. We have a second series starting for the work group too. You have to complete the first work group, but then you can join the second work group. But it really is structured support. I've had a lot of guys who call and say, why, if I say something about the Sex Addiction 101 book and workbook, and they go, well, I have that book, and I'll say, have you read it? Have you worked through it? Well, no. So this is structured time to do that. And I think with the couples group, I've told a couple of partners, like, I think you guys understand, you know, codependence, out of the doghouse, etc. But it would be helpful for your spouse, your partner, to listen to this information and get that perspective as well. So I think it can be useful information. Please check those out. We have a new webinar. New podcast. Let me check and see if I can get to the. So here's this is our new podcast cover. It did launch. I don't think we've got the links to it from sexandrelationshiphealing.com yet, but we will, hopefully yet this week. Scott was on vacation last week, but it did launch. I found it on Spotify. I've listened to a couple of them, so you can join that conversation as well. So, the next question, I'm going to start with this because we're going to run out of time and Dr. Rob can chime in. I'm in AA, and it seems like people generally have more long-term sobriety than in the S fellowships, and there are more sponsors available. Do you think this is accurate, and why would it be so? Well, first of all, it's a lot easier to just stop a behavior. And I think part of it is that AA has become so commonplace. I mean, it used to be that there was shame for being an alcoholic or whatever, but now we know that the face of alcoholism is everybody. So I think that there are a lot more. It's the largest organization. It's the founding organization, and you just stop, you know, like you don't ever have to drink again. But with sex or with eating, you have to figure out how to have a healthy relationship with that. I think there are less S groups. There's less S group meetings. And as Dr. Rob was starting to say, and will continue, there's less long-term. So people feel less qualified to be a sponsor. So I'm going to let you pick up with what you were sharing about.
Okay, someone asked
anorexia.
a question.
It was about sexual anorexia, but then the next question ties into it. So you can kind of come to roll that in.
Okay, but just real quick, someone asked if Scott's doing webinars or online meetings. And so Scott and Jason are two of our staff, and they do the workbook series online. And we do them I think we do them in 6-week segments. Every 6 weeks is a new one. And those gentlemen are doing them regularly. And I'm not sure if that's your question, but Tammy
No,
can
the
probably.
question is Scott doing an online, go watch the recorded, yeah, he's doing Dr. David's webinar on Wednesday night. So Scott Jason does not do these. He does the alumni for
Alumni.
Seeking Integrity, but he doesn't do on this platform. He's busy with other things, but Scott does support Dr. David on Wednesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So you can check Scott out, but on the previously recorded webinars, you can see tons of Scott. He does John Taylor's and he helps out with others. So you'll see him. So they both get great feedback. I've read the reviews and things, and they both are getting very good feedback. It's just structured support to go through.
We've been doing we've been using SurveyMonkey to see if people like the courses, and they seem to be liking them. So
well, not even just liking them, but finding the structure and the education, and having other guys going through that as well.
Right.
Like I was telling them, it's like you can have the book sitting on your end table and never pick it up, or you can have the structured support to go through it. So,
and education. Let me finish the question on anorexia. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So basically what I'm saying is I see people who struggle with sexual issues in terms of having too much, and they don't know how to deal with that, or they're doing their best to deal with it. They're trying to figure it out, and they go to the other side, which is having no sex at all. Or some people who are very easily have sex with strangers or in those kind of intensity-based situations, but find themselves avoiding sex with intimate partners. And this is all part of the work. This is all to be expected and not a surprise. But I also was saying that I do not think that stopping being sexual is an answer to healing. And let me give one example of that. I work with a guy who said, I have 90 days. I haven't had sex with anyone who's a single guy. I haven't had sex with anyone in 90 days, and I'm really proud. I'm doing really great. And it was 6 months, great. And what he learned was how to be sober and build friendships and get involved in his program and be in therapy. But after that 6 months was over, he wanted to start dating. He didn't know anything about dating. So simply not being sexual and avoiding the issue entirely doesn't help with the healthy part. This is someone, this is why I don't like Sexaholics Anonymous, SA, because they say you have to be in a committed relationship in order to join their program. And I think, well, half of us, how would we ever get in a committed relationship unless we learn how to hold hands and date and kiss and maybe make love with people and get our way into a relationship? So I think that avoiding sex is not the way around or through. It's just kind of another way of being stuck.
And I started answering this one, but I'd love your input. So in AA, it seems like people generally have more long-term sobriety than S fellowships, and there are more sponsors available. Do you think this is accurate, and why would it be so?
Yes, it is accurate, because it's a lot, Tammy, I don't mean to be dismissive.
No, I said the same thing. Go for it.
I think it's easier to recover from drugs and alcohol. I think it's easier to recover from substances because it's a yes or no thing. It's like, I can live the rest of my life and never drink. I'll be happy. I can live the rest of my life and not gamble, and I'll be happy. But no sex? Food? So when it comes to naturally occurring functions like food and sex that have run off the rails, the answer to it is not, again, not to stop or, I'm sorry, now I lost the question.
There's more sponsors and more long-term sobriety.
So AA will get people who have 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, because they just never drink again. But that doesn't mean, no offense to people in AA, that they work on intimacy problems. They may still have problems with food. They're not necessarily looking at their whole self. I think one of the things about our recovery is that it's so intimate. It's so personal. It's so shameful. It's so painful when we get in trouble, that I think it is a deeper level of work. And by the way, I've heard of many alcoholic and drug addicts who are in our world say, I stopped drinking and using, and then I realized what the real problem was. It was sex, love, and intimacy. And now I realize I had that problem long before I ever started drinking. So for a lot of folks, it's just the underlying issue.
And I think there's a lot of people in AA that are overeating, are they're like you said, they're acting out sexually, they're doing something else, so until we heal the underlying issues, we're going to just keep bouncing around things, but chemicals are the one you don't ever have to do that again. my eating disorder has been more of a challenge lifelong than, the drinking was a challenge at first, but now no big deal. But just don't do it
So,
today.
so Tammy, it's dinner time.
I know.
Enjoy where you are. It's dark where you are.
It is. It is.
It's never dark where I am.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. Hey,
Thanks,
guys,
everybody.
if you want to talk to me again on Friday at 6 o'clock California time, I'm on intherooms.com doing the same thing, only I don't get to do it with Tammy. If you want to work with me, I'm at the treatment center, seekingintegrity.com. And Tammy, thank you as always for spending the time.
Thank you. It was great to see you. Take care.
Have a good evening. Bye, all.
Bye.
See you later.